Candace Owens tried to control the narrative until Denzel Washington showed up with facts, composure, and a presence that changed the room. The lights overhead burned hot, but Denzel didn't sweat. His posture was upright, the kind of presence that came not from performance, but from years of knowing exactly who he was. The makeup artist had done her last check. The producers gave subtle signals behind the cameras, and there they were. 4 chairs, 3 panelists, 1 moderator, and the quiet tension that comes when you know something real is about to happen. Denzel sat still, not stiff. Every move was intentional. His charcoal suit was crisp, classic, no frills, just truth. Across from him, Candace Owens smiled the way she always did when she was ready to pounce. Calculated, polished, poised. The segment was Real America, a late-night program out of Phoenix on WJTX, famous for pushing boundaries and drawing blood. You didn't come here to talk. You came to stake a claim. The topic, race in America, criminal justice, political identity, familiar terrain on paper. But everyone in the room knew when Candace Owens was involved, it wasn't about the issue. It was about control. Mr. Washington, the moderator began, you've been vocal about inequities in the justice system, but others, like Candace here, argue that the system is fair, that race is too often used as a scapegoat. Your thoughts? Denzel didn't blink. His voice came low and measured like a verdict. See, the issue isn't that race is brought up too often. The issue is it's ignored until it costs somebody their future or their life. Candace smiled, that tight, well-worn smile, and jumped in. With respect, Mr. Washington, I think this constant focus on race, on victimhood, is dangerous. It teaches Black kids that every hardship is racism. I mean, look at me. I've succeeded. It's not about race. It's about choices. A couple heads nodded behind the cameras. That was the playbook. Candace as the anomaly. Candace as the proof that the system worked for everyone. But Denzel wasn't a man to be rushed. He turned just slightly. So you're saying systemic racism is exaggerated? Candace held her pose. Absolutely. We've got Black billionaires, celebrities, CEOs. Racism isn't stopping anyone. It's being used as an excuse. This is victimhood as strategy. The moderator glanced toward Denzel. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence settle just long enough to make the weight of her words echo back. Then he leaned forward. That's an interesting position, he said. Because I came across a public record last night that says something different. 2007, Stamford, Connecticut. A complaint filed by you. Candace blinked. I'm sorry. What? Denzel's voice didn't rise. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, unfolded a document slowly, deliberately, a formal discrimination complaint, filed with the Board of Education. You said you were harassed racially, and you didn't just file it. You got a settlement. Candace laughed, but it was hollow. I have no idea what you're referring to. Denzel didn't look away. I think you do. He held the paper out. Didn't need to wave it. The words hung heavier than paper ever could. You said you were targeted, that race was the reason, and the system agreed. Candace shifted in her seat. The moderator looked nervous. Now, let's try to keep things respectful. This is respectful, Denzel said, his tone unchanged. I'm not here to throw punches. I'm here to ask, how do you go from demanding protection from racism to denying it exists for others? The energy on set shifted. The cameraman felt it. The producers behind the glass felt it. Viewers at home leaned forward without knowing why. Candace's confidence faltered just for a second. She adjusted her lapel mic, buying time. That was a long time ago. I was young. It was different. Denzel nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. But it was true, wasn't it? Silence. Yes, Candace said. But that doesn't change the point I'm making. No, Denzel interrupted, voice calm as ever. It is the point because the truth doesn't have an expiration date. Candace looked down. Not long, just enough. She regrouped. Bringing up something from my teenage years doesn't negate what I've said about race being used politically. Denzel leaned back, his gaze steady. Actually, it proves exactly what I'm saying. When you experienced racism, you wanted justice, and you got it. But now you tell others to swallow what you couldn't. You call it politics. I call it history. Candace opened her mouth. A rebuttal was forming. Denzel cut in, voice smooth but firm. You said you were harassed. And in that moment, with the lights hot and the air sharp, she had nothing left to say. You said you were harassed, that you feared for your safety, that the school failed to protect you. Denzel's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. His words filled the space more than volume ever could. And you weren't wrong, he continued. But let's not rewrite history. You didn't overcome racism by pretending it didn't exist. You overcame it by calling it out. A low ripple ran through the studio audience. Quiet but undeniable. The moderator glanced at the producers, visibly tense, then turned back to the table, trying to regain control. Okay, maybe let's keep this about current policy, Mr. Washington. Denzel cut in respectfully but unshaken. We are talking about current policy because what we see now, it's built on patterns that came before. You don't fix the roof without checking the foundation. And that includes her foundation. Candace let out a sharp breath, like a balloon losing air too fast. You don't know me. Denzel didn't blink. I know your words. And that's enough. Candace straightened in her seat, now louder, pushing back. You're twisting things. People evolve. I've grown. I've learned. But what I've also learned is that too many people lean on victimhood as a crutch, and it holds the whole community back. Denzel tilted his head just slightly. Not in disagreement, but with clarity. You didn't grow past it. You grew from it. That's the difference. You used that experience to build something real. But now, instead of helping young people stand when they're being targeted the way you once were, you're telling them they're imagining it. The air shifted again in the room, through the cameras, in homes watching across the country. Candace let out another laugh, this one emptier than the last. So now I'm a hypocrite because I don't walk around angry. Denzel stayed centered, unmoved. Number. You're not a hypocrite because you're not angry. You're a hypocrite because you're not honest. You benefited from the very system you say doesn't exist. And then you told everyone else to pretend it's not real. Silence. Then Denzel turned slightly to the cameras, to the audience at home. Here's the reality. Racism didn't disappear the day Candace Owens got a book deal or a podcast or a platform. And pretending it did doesn't help the kid trying to graduate without being profiled. Doesn't help the woman with the resume she has to whiten. Doesn't help the brother just trying to survive a traffic stop. One of the panelists, a former state senator from Arizona, cleared his throat, hoping to break the moment. Maybe we should move the conversation towards solutions. But Denzel didn't move. The spotlight hadn't left. The moment wasn't done. Candace tried again. You think you're helping people by convincing them they're victims? Denzel's voice remained calm, but the weight in it grew. Number. I'm helping people remember what it took to have a voice in the first place. You tell folks to stop complaining, but you filed a complaint. And you were right, too. You were right. But the second you got a microphone, you forgot what it felt like to be 17 and scared. The moderator tried to throw it to commercial. But even he knew this was the moment. This was the clip, the quote, the pulse. Still, Denzel wasn't done. Not until the contradiction stood bar and sharp in the center of the room. Candace had built her brand on being in control. She didn't shout. She didn't stutter. She kept her edges sharp and her answers sharper. But tonight, the rhythm was off. Denzel wasn't yelling. He wasn't debating. He was exposing. Candace reached for an old standby. Black Americans make up 13% of the population, but commit over 50% of violent crime. That's not emotion. That's FBI data. Denzel turned to her slowly. This time, there was steel in his voice. Are you really doing that right now? Throwing out cherry-picked crime stats like scripture. Candace didn't flinch. It's not cherry-picked. It's real. It's real, Denzel agreed. But it's not neutral. That number doesn't tell you how those arrests happened. Doesn't show you which neighborhoods are over-policed. Doesn't count the quiet cover-ups in gated communities. Doesn't tell you what doesn't get reported when the zip code has a country club. Candace's voice sharpened. You can't excuse violence just because of where it happens. Denzel leaned back, still steady. No one's excusing anything. I'm saying the system doesn't see everyone the same. And you know that because you live that. At 17, Candace went quiet for the first time in the segment, visibly unsure. She looked to the moderator. He looked back but gave no lifeline. She changed tactics. You know what's exhausting? She said. Being told I'm not black enough, that I'm a sellout just because I don't blame racism for everything. Denzel answered instantly. No one called you a sellout. I said you were dishonest. There's a difference. Candace sat back, crossed her arms, said nothing. The room held its breath, and Denzel waited. Candace crossed her arms. So, people don't have the right to think differently now? Denzel didn't even shift. Sure they do, he said evenly. But when you step on a national stage and use your story to erase the pain of millions of others, that's not thinking differently. That's packaging a lie with your name stamped on it. Candace scoffed. I'm not selling anything. Denzel raised an eyebrow. Not dramatic, just honest. Really? You're on podcasts, paid appearances, book tours. You're selling a brand, Candace. And that brand requires you to forget that you once filed a complaint, that you once needed help, that you were hurt. Candace's jaw clenched, her foot tapped under the table. The camera caught it. The moderator leaned forward, searching for an exit. All right, let's maybe pivot. No, Denzel said, sharp but not loud. We finish this point because it matters. The room didn't tense. It focused. Every time you tell a black kid that they're just making excuses, Denzel said, voice low, steady, you erase the moment you needed someone to believe you, to take your fears seriously, to act on your behalf. Candace didn't answer. I'm not here to win a debate, Denzel continued. I'm here because too many folks watching this right now don't have someone who speaks to their experience, and I won't let that get dismissed just because it makes for a cleaner headline. Silence. Real dense silence. And then Candace tried to deflect. Well, she said, voice coated with condescension, at least I don't cry on cue and ask for sympathy. That did it. Denzel chuckled. Not cruel, not mocking. Just that kind of laugh you give when someone finally admits they've got nothing left to say. I never asked for sympathy, he said. Just accountability. But if that's too heavy, don't worry. I've been carrying it alone for a long time. Candace sat up straighter, tried to recover. She faced the camera like muscle memory had kicked in. I think what we're seeing here is performance politics, she said. Mr. Washington isn't interested in honesty. He's chasing virality. Denzel didn't blink. His hands rested calmly in his lap. He looked at her the way someone watches a person mop the floor with the faucet still running. You keep saying I'm performing, he said. But all I've done tonight is ask questions you won't answer. No catchphrases, no slogans, just facts. Candace gave a half laugh, dismissive. The fact is, people like you need racism to keep your careers alive. Denzel didn't turn to her. He looked right into the lens, calm, direct. Let me be clear. I didn't get here by telling people they were victims. I got here by telling them they deserve better, and by fighting like hell to make sure they got it. Candace cut in louder now. Number. You got here by selling fear and division, just like the rest of them. And then it came. The moment Denzel looked at her, not angry, not smug, just steady. You don't get to rewrite history just because the cameras are on. That line landed like a church bell in an empty hall. It echoed. Everyone felt it. The air pulled tight. Candace opened her mouth, then closed it. No retort came. Denzel leaned in slightly. You filed that complaint because you were scared. You were young. You were black. And you were targeted. That was real. Your experience mattered. It still does. But pretending it didn't happen. Pretending you never needed help. That's not strength. That's just survival. Dressed up as denial. Candace tried to pivot. So now I'm not allowed to change my views? Of course you can change, Denzel replied. But don't gaslight the very people walking the same road you once cried for help on. The moderator was quiet now. So were the other panelists. One reached for a water bottle. Slowly, like the sound of the cap might break the tension. Candace finally broke the silence, but this time her voice wasn't sharp, just thinner. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of betraying my community. Denzel raised an eyebrow just slightly. I didn't accuse you of anything. I reminded you. That's what accountability looks like. Candace shifted, then let out another short laugh. Defensive. You know, I've sat across from plenty of people who tried to make me feel small. You're not the first. Denzel's response was quiet, measured. I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm trying to remind you you're bigger than this. That line didn't hit like a punch. It hit like a mirror. And for just a flicker, it showed in Candace's eyes, a crack in the armor. And Denzel. He didn't press, he let it breathe. That's when the moderator finally cleared his throat, voice unsure, but ready to take back control of the segment. We're going to head to a break shortly, the moderator said. But Denzel raised his hand slightly, not rushed. Just firm. Before we do, he said, voice rising just a touch for the first time all night, I want to say something. Not to this room, to the folks watching at home. He turned to the camera. Not to perform, to speak directly, plainly to the kitchens, break rooms, living rooms across America. If you've ever been made to feel like your experience doesn't count, if somebody told you that what you lived through was just in your head, don't let them erase you. Don't let them smooth over the truth just because it's uncomfortable. You matter, even when the folks with the biggest microphones pretend you don't. And then he paused, gave them space, the ones who needed to hear it. While viewers caught their breath, Candace was trying to find hers. And the next few minutes would only make it worse. By the time the segment actually cut to commercial, the internet was already in flames. Clips of the moment, Denzel, calm, clear, unwavering, began flooding timelines before the credits even rolled. Someone in the control room had leaked a raw angle. No cuts, no edits, just truth. The quote, "You don't get to rewrite history just because the cameras are on," was already everywhere. Like thunder. Memes, GIFs, hashtags. Even accounts that usually avoided conflict were sharing screenshots. There was no spin fast enough to contain it. Backstage, Candace paced the hallway in heels that suddenly felt too tight. Her assistant trailed her, phone in hand, whispering updates she didn't ask for. Trending number 4 on X. Over 4 million views on just one clip. Candace didn't respond. She was too busy replaying it all, trying to pinpoint the second she lost control, trying to figure out how Denzel never lost his. Meanwhile, Denzel sat in the green room, calm, composed. His phone buzzed beside him, face down. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. He hadn't come for a fight. He came to tell the truth. And the country had listened. Within an hour, pundits were weighing in. A centrist Florida radio host said, "I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Denzel Washington showed us what it means to be principled under pressure." Another commentator posted, "Candace Owens just met a man who wouldn't play the game, and it showed." But the real energy, the real movement, came from regular folks, teachers, barbers, students, parents, people who had never tweeted about politics a day in their lives. I've watched Candace Owens for years. This was the first time I saw her rattled. Denzel didn't yell, didn't mock, didn't dodge. He just laid out the truth and waited to see who squirmed. He said what we've needed to hear on national television for a long, long time. There was empathy, too. But not for Candace. Viewers had remembered that old racial complaint. Some pulled up local news clippings from Connecticut. Others shared archived court documents. The receipts were real, public, tangible. Candace Owens had once asked for protection. Now she was branding that same fear as weakness. The pressure was rising. Later that night, Candace issued a statement across her platforms. It read in part, "I will never apologize for evolving. Yes, I experienced racism in my youth, but I overcame it. Not by wallowing in it, but by refusing to be defined by it. Some people hate that kind of strength." But this time, the crowd didn't fall in line. The replies flooded in. Evolving doesn't mean erasing. You don't get to overcome racism and act like it doesn't exist. You can't climb the ladder and then pull it up behind you. And then quietly Denzel posted. No names, no hashtags, no mic drop. Just words. Truth doesn't need a spotlight, just someone steady enough to hold it. For hours after air, Denzel's clip had passed 15 million views across platforms. Even people who hadn't watched the show were quoting him. Back on set, the producers were still in quiet awe. "I knew it was going to blow up," one said. "But not like this." Behind his desk, the host reviewed the footage. He looked up and finally said what most were already thinking. Candace brought the volume. Denzel brought the receipts. But this wasn't just a TV moment. By morning, people were asking why it hit so hard. And the answer was simple. Denzel Washington hadn't just checked Candace Owens. He held up a mirror and made the country look. In coffee shops across Philly, Detroit, Oakland, Birmingham. The conversation hadn't stopped, because this wasn't just a clip. It was a moment. "We'll head to a break shortly," the moderator said, unsure, like he knew it wouldn't be just yet. Denzel raised his voice. Just a touch, enough for the words to carry. "Before we do, I've got something to say. Not to the panel, to the people at home." He turned to the camera. "Not for show, for connection. If you've ever been told your experience didn't count, if someone tried to convince you what you felt wasn't real just because it made them uncomfortable, don't let them erase you. Don't let them polish over the truth to make it easier to swallow. You matter, even when the people with the mic pretend you don't." He let it breathe. No rush, no hype, just presence. And in homes across America, people didn't just watch, they listened. By the time the show cut to commercial, the internet had already exploded. Clips were everywhere. That line, "You can't rewrite history just because the cameras are on," was being quoted like scripture. Not just because of what he said, but how he said it. No yelling, no insults, just truth. Steady as a stone. Backstage, Candace Owens paced, rattled. Her team whispered updates she didn't ask for. Trending number 3, 7 million views in under an hour. But she wasn't listening. She was trying to figure out how she lost control, and how Denzel never did. Meanwhile, Denzel sat alone in the green room, calm, phone buzzing. He didn't check it. Didn't need to. He hadn't come to trend. He came to tell the truth, and America felt it. Commentators tried to catch up, left, right, center. But the moment had already passed them. It belonged to the people now, teachers, nurses, students, veterans, people who had lived versions of what Denzel described. Quietly, repeatedly, a high schooler in Milwaukee wrote, "He didn't just speak for himself. He spoke for the parts of me I was told to hide." A teacher in Atlanta told her class, "This is what dignity under pressure looks like." And a father in Columbus paused the clip midway, turned to his daughter, and said, "This is how you defend yourself without lowering yourself." It wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about scoring points. It wasn't even about Candace anymore. It was about the contradictions so many people live every day. Being told racism isn't real by people who once cried for protection from it. Being told to let go when the scar is still fresh. Being told they're imagining things while everyone else agrees not to see it. And Denzel, he didn't try to destroy anyone. He just stood still while the truth walked in. Candace had followers, a brand, a platform. But Denzel had something else. Credibility. And that doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being consistent. Matching your past to your present without pretending the in-between never happened. That's why it landed. Because people didn't just see a takedown. They saw someone say what needed to be said, without shouting, without swagger, just grace under fire. And while Candace spiraled into damage control, podcasting, tweeting, reframing, Denzel posted a photo. Just one. Him sitting in the studio chair, hands folded. For words beneath it, hold your truth steady. No hashtags, no ego, just the message. And that, not the debate, not the internet noise, is what stuck. Because Denzel reminded people, you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to shake the table to tell the truth. You just need to stand in it, unmoved. Across the country, people were still talking. Not about who won, but about what was revealed. And that's bigger than a debate. Legacy isn't built in a moment. It's built in how you handle it. And when the noise faded, as it always does, the lesson remained. Clarity wins where noise fades. In truth just needs someone steady enough to carry.